you ready for an entertainment experience of a lifetime? Knockdown, drag-out, hard-hitting conversations, debates, and interviews. Well, if you said yes to any of these questions, sit back, relax, and enjoy something like no other. This is the Isolation Series podcast, presented by Wellbeingsperformance.com for all your online meeting needs, and by ImprintPilates.com Toronto and the Greater Toronto Area's premier Pilates studio, also specializing in rehabilitation and athletic conditioning, and finally by greenstorage.ca Toronto and the Greater Toronto Area's #1 self-storage facility. Here now is your host, Spencer Miller.
Hey guys, and welcome to this Friday edition of the Isolation Series. Me, Spencer Miller, very pleased to be joined by a much more talkative today, Paul Shields, than he was yesterday during the Iron Eagle interview. And he is rocking the old school Adidas t-shirt for old time's sake on today's episode of the Isolation Series. Paul, welcome back to you. We missed you yesterday, as we mentioned at the back end of that interview, but it was a great interview with Iron Eagle nonetheless, even though he was throwing jabs out at me subtly, but what can you do? Let's dive right in, though, Paul. We had the beginning of week 3 of the NFL season take place last night between the Carolina Panthers and the Houston Texans, down Tyrod Taylor because of Tyrod Taylor's injury and whatnot. So we saw the first NFL start for Davis Mills, I believe his name was, at quarterback for the Houston Texans. And although he did not look horrible by any stretch of the imagination for his first throw into the fire, that Carolina defense fed off of him all night last night and gave him at least a half dozen really solid hits, and he just kept getting up. It resulted in the Carolina Panthers ending up winning the game 24-9, and Sam Darnold looked really, really good. However, Christian McCaffrey, the star running back for the Carolina Panthers, who has had injury problems throughout his career himself, went out again with a apparent hamstring injury. We don't know how long that is going to sideline him. So even though that is sad, it is also opening up an opportunity for Canadian Chuba Hubbard, who made a name for himself at Oklahoma State, to go out there and show what he can do. So hopefully that'll be good for him there. And they also lost one of their key defenders in J.C. Horn, who they drafted as well. Don't know how long he's going to be out. But my comment to you is this. They're 3-0 for the first time since 2015 when they went to Super Bowl 50. No doubt about it, with Cam Newton and Ron Rivera. But the strength of their schedule has been a little suspect in the opening 3 weeks of the season, with the exception of, on paper, playing the New Orleans Saints. But even when they played the New Orleans Saints last Sunday, the New Orleans Saints were ravaged with COVID-19 issues and things like that. So they were playing a depleted New Orleans Saints team. My question to you is, do you believe that the first real measure of the season will come to them next week as they face the Dallas Cowboys on Monday Night Football?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, this defense is for real. This is a very good team as far as on the defensive side of the ball. So, just while we're thinking of defense, it says here NFL.com is reporting 2 to 3 months for J.C. Horn with a broken foot was the diagnosis today. So that's a bummer for that defense. However, I do think that this is still a pretty good team. Playing the Cowboys on Monday Night Football is a marquee game. The Cowboys would be probably the best opponent they've played this year, with, again, like you said, the Saints kind of sit in that same category. But I think it'll be the first real test of this team, but you can't take away the 3 wins that they already have, right? Like, they don't make the schedule. They just play who steps in front of them. And they've taken care of business against teams that I think that they feel that they're better than and they can beat. So that's a good thing. And Sam Darnold, I think took a lot of unwarranted heat playing in that Jet system. Like Ian talked about it yesterday. If he gets drafted by somebody else, is he traded, a few years into his career? So I think Carolina has a very good quarterback. They have a defense that is, very, very good. So this team is going to creep towards being a pretty good team. So I tend to believe that they're going to have a good season. I don't know if they're playoff bound, but I think next week's going to tell us a lot about what we need to know.
Speaking of this week, though, can you remember a week 3 matchup that is as enticing as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the LA Rams? Because I know it's week 3, but there's something about this matchup that could also tell us a lot for future matchups later on in the season and a potential playoff matchup between the two in a Super Bowl scenario or whatever the case may be. And again, like you said, it is early and it is only week 3, but I cannot remember this much excitement being around a week 3 matchup in a long, long time. Matt Stafford has really looked like a rejuvenated player through the first 2 weeks of the season in that LA Rams Sean McVay led system. Plus, he has great weapons like Cooper Kupp and so on and so forth around him. And Daryl Henderson Jr. as your running back, and then Tom Brady has had a amazing start to his season and possibly a historical start to his season at the age of 44, throwing for 9 touchdowns against only 2 interceptions. So, should people get excited about this week 3 matchup like I am, or should people pump the brakes on that a bit, in your opinion?
No, I agree. I think this is a really fun matchup for a bunch of reasons. You've got both teams are 2-0, right? Both teams are playing exceptionally well on both sides of the ball. You have Tom Brady, who's having a historic start, like you mentioned, 44 years old. The guy's ageless, going up against a Rams defense that includes, Donald, who's one of the best pass rushers in the game. So there's a lot of good storylines beyond the, could this be a preview of something in the future? There's a lot to like here. And I mean, maybe it's just the intrigue of seeing Tom Brady play at such a high level at 44 years old. But most of the games that the Buccaneers play are must watch just to see what happens next. So when you line them up against an opponent who's also undefeated, who has a great defense, who has an offense that's been really effective this year, I think it's must watch TV. So I totally agree with you.
Okay, and the other thing, obviously, that I want to talk about right off the hop is this. As we just mentioned, we have some great matchups going into week 3. One of the other intriguing matchups to me is the LA Chargers going into Kansas City to face a Kansas City Chiefs team who has not been very Kansas City Chief like in the first 2 weeks of the season. Now, obviously, most people's expectations of the Kansas City Chiefs are extremely high these days based on the Patrick Mahomes era and Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce and all the weapons that they have. But they haven't seemed to really get into their groove all that much in the first 2 weeks of the season. And this Justin Herbert-led LA Chargers team with Joey Bosa on the defensive side and Keenan Allen as a huge weapon on the offensive side as well, along with Austin Eckler as your running back. Do you believe that this may end up being a closer matchup than the 7-point spread that Kansas City is currently favored at?
Yeah, I'm not really sure how you could favor Kansas City at a full touchdown just with the way they've played in the first 2 weeks. I would have seen them beating the Ravens handily on Monday night, which they obviously didn't do. And I wonder, it's hard to say because it's week 3 and they're 1-1, but is this a little bit of early season adversity that we just haven't seen? Like Patrick Mahomes has been pretty much dominant since he took the helm of that team. They have had tremendous success since he's been the leader of that offense. So, I think this week, although, it's week 3, you can't call a week 3 game a must-win game, but this might be as close to that as we've seen for the Chiefs, where they're just, like you said, they don't look like the team that we have come to know over the last few years. So I think that the Chiefs need to bounce back, but this is not a team. You as a really good team in the NFL, if you're not playing well, you hope to line up against, I don't know, the Detroit Lions, so you can get yourself back in the win column, right, and put on a good show. Sorry to Detroit Lions.
Like the Green Bay Packers just did. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. But the Chargers are a sneaky good team. And you mentioned some of the weapons that they have. I think this is going to be a tough week for Kansas City. I could see Kansas City winning, but I don't see them winning by a touchdown.
Right. The next team I want to talk about, and the next game that I want to talk about, is a game that we mentioned or a team that we mentioned a little bit with Ian yesterday, and that is the Indianapolis Colts going into Tennessee against the Tennessee Titans, and they are going in without Carson Wentz at the helm. Do you believe that this is a game, like you were just mentioning, getting everything clicking? Do you think that everything will finally click for the Tennessee Titans in this game? Because personally speaking, I believe that they may beat the Colts by at least 14 points. Is that too much of me thinking? Or do you think without Carson Wentz at the helm, 14 points might be a realistic expectation to see the Tennessee Titans beat them on Sunday?
Well, I mean, I think the Titans are obviously favorites in this game. 14 points seems like a lot, but without Carson Wentz, there's definitely a chance. Like, do we know who is replacing him for this game? Do we know who is playing quarterback?
He came in at the end last week, but I forget what his name is. If you really wanted to, you could look it up on Uncle Google.
Oh, is it Jacob Eason? Is that the right name?
That is correct. Yes.
Well, the fact that we had to look up his name, and as I looked it up here, it says he's thrown a total of 5 NFL career passes. Look, like these guys are NFL players, so I don't want to sound dismissive or disrespectful. This guy's obviously got enough talent to be on an NFL roster, but he's playing against a good Titans team. It's good. This is going to be a tough week for Indianapolis. I think they're looking at an 0-3 start. And although I think 14-point spreads are really hard to cover in the NFL, I do think the Titans will win, and they'll win handily.
One of the other sneaky games of this week's schedule, in my opinion, is the Washington football team going into Ralph Wilson or New Era or whatever they're calling it now, stadium in Buffalo, to face Josh Allen and the Bills. We know that they face some adversity with Ryan Fitzpatrick or Ryan Fitzmagic in your estimation, going out in one with his injury, and then Taylor Heineke came in. But Taylor Heineke has shown some really good guts and some really good, poise since he took over for Ryan Fitzpatrick. I believe that this may end up coming down to a field goal between these two teams. Right now, the Bills are favored by 8 points, and I just think that that's a little too much.
Now, see, I feel like after what the Bills were able to do last week and really clicking, I think they come into this game with a lot of confidence. So for me, I don't know. I think I would tend to lean towards that spread. I just think the Bills are clicking, and I think that although I like Tyler Heineke, he, particularly in last week's game, he had a knack for doing the wrong thing at the wrong time, and ultimately ended up costing them that game, right? So I'm I would say I probably lean with the Bills on this one, but that could be a little bit of bias on my part. I don't have an NFL team. I'm not a particular fan of one team or the other, but I really like Josh Allen, and I think that he's a very, very good quarterback. And I think that when a good quarterback starts feeling it, that's when you got to worry, right? And a 35 spot last week. I mean, and of course the Dolphins are just a different team. They're not. I think the Washington team is a better team overall, but man, when you got a quarterback who's that good, who's just got a ton of confidence coming off of last week, I think I would lean towards the Bills on this one.
And last two games that I want to cover with you is right now the Cleveland Browns are favored over the Chicago Bears at home in Cleveland by 7 points. This is another intriguing matchup to me because we know that their star wide receiver, Odell Beckham, hasn't started the season with them yet, and he's questionable yet again for Sunday's game versus the Bears. And we know that last week, Jarvis Landry, their other big wide receiver threat, ended up, straining both his MCL and ACLs. So we don't know if he's going to play either. And we know that Baker Mayfield is a talented quarterback, yes, but losing your threats like that, even though they still have Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt at the running back positions, I believe this opens up an amazing opportunity for the Chicago Bears and Justin Fields, who is starting for the injured Andy Dalton for the first time in his NFL career. Justin Fields is used to big games at Ohio State, and I do believe that this could be an upset of the week. Right now, the Browns are favored by 7 points. I honestly believe that Chicago could come out and win this game outright. Your thoughts?
Yeah, this game feels like a little bit of a trap. That 7 points is a lot. I feel like this is a little bit of a toss-up game for me, particularly with all the injuries that you laid out. And that, I think I like that Cleveland team, but this is going to come down to a field goal at most. And I could see Chicago sneaking this out. You have a motivated young quarterback, and we've seen what some of these young talented quarterbacks can do this season, right? That was a huge storyline going into the year, and we've seen a lot of really great things. Now it's Justin Fields' chance to show off, and a guy like that who's that competitive, who sees other players like the Mac Jones of the world playing well and doing good things. That he wants to go out there and show what he can do. So, with a week of practice at first team reps, and having him at the helm for the whole game, I could see Chicago sneaking this out as well.
Now we turn our attention to the Sunday night game with Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth on NBC, and it is quite the doozy, and that is the Green Bay Packers coming off of their Monday night win in Detroit, or not in Detroit, but against Detroit rather, going up against the undefeated San Francisco 49ers, and what appears to be a rejuvenated Jimmy Garoppolo at the quarterback position for them. Obviously, in the draft, they also drafted a very highly touted quarterback in Trey Lance, but they haven't needed to bring him in really in the first 2 weeks because Jimmy and the boys have really taken care of business. And let's not forget, Paul, that this entire offseason, there was a giant narrative that Kyle Shanahan and the brass of the San Francisco 49ers were doing everything and anything they could to try and move Jimmy Garoppolo because for some reason the coach and Jimmy weren't really getting along. Somehow they were able to put that aside, at least for the beginning of the season, and it's really showing, at least in 2 weeks, to prove like a smart move to keep Jimmy Garoppolo because he has proven to be a winner when he is healthy and things like that. However, you have the legend of Aaron Rodgers, who righted the ship, as I was talking about earlier on in the podcast, against Detroit on Monday night. Yes, San Francisco technically has more weapons on the offensive side of the ball with George Kittle and some of their young receivers as well and different things like that. but I honestly do believe that this could come down once again to a field goal, which a lot of the bettors believe that as well. Because right now, as I'm looking at it, the line is San Francisco favored by 2.5.
Yeah, and that feels about right. Although I have a hard time betting against Aaron Rodgers, particularly with the chip on his shoulder. Although you laid it out nicely, like the San Francisco quarterback and management and GM, Garoppolo and the 49ers didn't have a rosy offseason. It sort of mirrored what was going on in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay brass. So I think it's going to be an interesting. I think it's going to be an interesting matchup. The Sunday night matchups always tend to be pretty darn good games. So I think that both these guys like the bright lights. I think they like the more pressure packed games. But there's something about Aaron Rodgers as an underdog, even if it's only 2.5 points, has me wanting to lean towards that. And I have literally no actual evidence from this year's Green Bay team because they've been so sporadic. Game 1 looked so terrible. Game 2 looked pretty darn good. So I have no idea what to expect from Game 3, but seeing an underdog, seeing Aaron Rodgers as an underdog makes me want to lean that way.
All right. Do we want to talk about the Jays today? Because
Oh boy.
because I know that we're in a playoff race and a wild card race, and everybody likes hearing about us talk about the Jays, and we make no apologies about wanting to talk about the Jays. But something about the last 2 days really doesn't make me want to talk about the Jays all that much today. I don't know if we should. What do you think?
Well, what I want to talk about is George Springer. And we've talked about his injury a lot here. And I've been pretty bullish about how keeping him in the lineup when he was hitting was the right thing to do. He is not hitting. In his last 2 games, he's 0 for 10. 0 for 10 in the last 2 Blue Jay losses.
With 6 strikeouts, nonetheless.
So, and look, even the best hitters in the game, and George Springer is among one of the best players in baseball at his position, one of the best hitters at his position. Everyone goes through slumps. But if you're struggling so much so, that's your leadoff batter who in 2 full games has not even had a sniff at being on base. That's tough, and that it sets the tone for the team. So, this is where I can see where people who are frustrated with some of the decisions that Charlie Montoyo makes, being frustrated with him keeping him at the top of the lineup, even though he's struggling. So the people that love Charlie think it's a great thing for consistency and loyalty and all of these things. But I don't know. It's tough to feel like that's the right thing to do when when he's just not, he's hitting at such a poor rate right now.
Right. And another thing that I want to talk about as well is this. The rotation has been one of the best in all of baseball in the second half. We've well documented that as well. But the last 2 games, having a bullpen game when it was supposed to be Hyun-Jin Ryu, because Hyun-Jin Ryu went on the IL with neck tightness and everything like that. We hope that he is getting right for the last couple of games of the season, that we will need him. But then Steven Matz, who's been a really big revelation for this team in the second half of the season as well, goes out last night and grinds through 3 innings and just left a ton of, men on base. And
Yeah.
it could have been a lot worse when he left the game than it was. But I don't want to push the panic button here too much, because they're still, I believe, 17-6 or 16-6, which is still a really good record, all things considered, in September, end of August. But we need to get right, and we need to get right quick, because there's 9 games left.
Yeah, I agree. And so they have to take care of business against Minnesota. They have to bounce back. Steven Matz has been pitching unbelievable for the month of September, much like all of the Blue Jays have been playing. So I think this was kind of a leveling of the odds, right? Like we know that Steven Matz isn't Garrett Cole.
A blip in the radar, so to speak.
Yeah. So I'm less concerned about that. I think today, who do we have today? Is Robbie back up today?
No, Jose Barrios and then Robbie tomorrow.
Robbie tomorrow. Okay. So like you're now going into the next two games, and it doesn't really matter who Minnesota throws up against either of those two guys. You can confidently say that the Blue Jays have the best pitcher in the next two matchups. And I think that's a fair thing to say. They are very
and even on Sunday with Alek Manoah.
I think you're absolutely right. I think Manoah's put himself in the conversation of being, a top starter for the Blue Jays this year. So you're looking at the next three games. You can feel good about your pitching, right? That this team has the bats, right? They've been a little quiet over the last couple of games, but you know that you have it there. So I'm less concerned. They need to hold court against Minnesota, and then they have to win against the Yankees. That Yankees series is going to make or break this season for the Blue Jays. I think the one thing that might scare me a little bit from last night's loss, the loss doesn't bother me quite as much as losing Gurriel. Is something that's concerning because he has been on fire. So let's but they've said nothing is broken, so fingers crossed he's not out long.
Well, yeah, I'm assuming it'll be like a 3 or 4 day thing, which in the last week of the season is not ideal. But if we can somehow still get into the playoffs, I still think that we will see Lourdes Gurriel somehow make it into the lineup if we do make it into a wild card situation, especially.
Yeah, and I think that like anyone who thought the Jays were just going to walk into the playoffs after that huge run, it was sadly mistaken. This is exactly where this team should be, right? They're progressing. They're in important games. We've got, we're 2 weeks left in the season, and this team is one game out, legitimately in the fight right to the final buzzer for that wild card spot. So keeping that in perspective, like this was never going to be easy. And now this is where the rubber meets the road. The one thing that we've said a ton of times on this show, and I think this team has proven over and over again, is they are resilient. They have the ability to bounce back. They have short memories when bad things happen and long memories when good things happen. So I have a lot of faith in the character of this team. Now they just got to start putting some wins together.
Okay, I'm going to mention two things to you then. I believe that even if they still go 6-4 over the next 10 games, that still might be good enough to get them into the wild card game at this point, which at the end of August, you never would have thought that a 6-4 finish would have been good enough for the Jays to even think about getting into that wild card situation. Would you agree with that? I know that 7-3 will pretty much cinch it. So if we go 7-3, 100% or pretty close to 100%, we will be in that wild card situation. If we go 6-4, it still might be a little dicey, and we might end up having to play an extra 163rd game season of the year because of a tie potentially.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think what the Jays have done in their September to this point is put themselves in the driver's seat. And made it really hard on the teams around them, made it really hard on Boston, made it really hard on New York to be considered the favorites, right? To get in. So I tend to agree. I think the 6-4 might get it done. I would feel a whole lot more comfortable with 7-3, but 6-4 might get it done.
I wanted to ask you this question, and maybe you can look it up because I don't know what the actual scenario would be for us. But right now, tonight, the Yankees and the Red Sox face each other in a 3-game series at Fenway Park. My question to you is, what impact does those two teams playing each other have on the Blue Jays for the next 3 games? Because it has to have some impact. I just don't know what impact specifically.
Well, I mean, the important thing is that right now the Yankees and Red Sox are both ahead of the Blue Jays. So what that means is that the Jays are one game back of the Yankees and looks like 2.5 back of the Red Sox. But let's just say, for sake of argument, 1 and 2 games behind the teams in the wild card spots currently. So one of those teams has to lose 2 games. So the Blue Jays still have their fate in their own hands. If the Blue Jays can win their games and continue to make up ground, then either they're going to be a game ahead of the Yankees or near even, or a game ahead of the Yankees or even with the Red Sox. So the Jays have the ability to control their destiny. And the fact that the Yankees and Red Sox are playing mean one of those teams that they're chasing will lose 2 games over the next 3 nights. So that's huge.
Yes. And do you believe that, I know we mentioned it a couple times on this show, but do you believe that starting Tuesday with that 3-game series in Toronto against the Yankees, do you believe that that series alone will determine who gets into the playoffs?
I really do. I mean, unless either the Jays, Yankees, or Red Sox, unless somebody really just completely has a terrible last 10-game stretch, and they just take themselves out of the conversation entirely, I really believe that those 3 games against the Yankees are the season, right? And here I just grabbed the most up-to-date standings, and it is so the Red Sox are 2 games ahead of the Yankees. So, again, the teams in front of them now have to play each other. The Jays have to take care of their own business. So if they can win against Minnesota, they are right back in a wild card spot going into the most important series of the season.
And you and I talk about a lot of stuff on this program. I wanted to get your thoughts just quickly before we wrap it up on, have you heard anything? Because I keep hearing rumblings that they are going to increase the attendance at Rogers Center for that Yankee series starting on Tuesday. Have you heard anything about that? And if you have, what have you heard?
The only thing that I read today was that Ontario is preparing to announce about capacities for indoor venues like Scotiabank Arena, which could also affect and open up capacity for outdoor venues like the Rogers Center, the Sky Dome. So that I know that there's an announcement coming. It's expected to come today. So I think by the time that we talk on Monday, we're going to know exactly how many fans are allowed in the building to watch the Leafs and Raptors, and how many more fans are allowed to go and cheer on the Blue Jays while they play the Yankees next week.
Right. And under the new guidelines, we have to show, proof of vaccination and things like that going in for indoor dining and to gyms and stuff like that, because you go to the gym a lot when you're not participating at Polly's Pump Palace. You actually go to the gym. Have you been to the gym in the last couple of days and seen what the new guidelines are exactly?
Yeah, it's been pretty straightforward. Because I did a little bit of traveling earlier in August or later in August. I had my vaccine, my proof of vaccination already on my phone, which made it very easy for me. I showed my Ontario Health receipt with the date of vaccination, and then I scanned my gym pass, so my name matches the name on the vaccination report, and I went without any issue. So for me, it wasn't an issue. I know the one thing that people have been running into is the Ontario website is very busy with people trying to download their vaccination receipt. So I would really encourage anybody who is going to events or wanting to do anything over the weekend or into next week, go now, download it now. It could take a little bit of time because folks are on the site, but don't leave it to the last minute, because you will be frustrated and you may not get what you need.
However, I think I was very smart because I took that sheet right when they gave it to me after my second shot and took a picture of it right then and there. And so it's been on my phone for like 3 months. So all I need to do is go through my photos. Bing, thank you very much. There you go.
Yeah, absolutely. And just I would confirm that wherever you're going is accepting that. I know there are some places that have been a little stricter than others as far as what they'll accept, but yeah, anything you can do to show your proof of vaccination is anything to make it easier, right? Because a lot of people are looking for that now, and the website is a little slow.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can tell you this. I know that you are going to be joining me at the Rogers Center Skydome for one of the Yankees games next week, and it is going to be one hell of an atmosphere, my friend. One hell of an atmosphere. But I also wanted to say, it's been a great week of shows for us. Want to say thank you again to the people for listening to the vast majority of our interviews as of late due to technical issues. But now we have the YouTube situation going on for video again, so that's exciting. And I can also tell you that there's going to be a lot more guests coming in the month of October than we've had for the month of September. So you guys can look forward to that, because although you enjoy hearing our voices and hearing us discuss the topics of the day, I know that you guys like the wide array of guests that we are able to pull in as well. So apologize for the slow September, but gear up for a entertaining October nonetheless. And Paul, always thank you to you for coming on here and chopping it up with me every day or almost every day on this little thing that we like to refer to as the Isolation Series, my friend.
Thanks, Spence. It's always great. Another great week, and we'll catch everyone next week.
Absolutely. But for Paul Shields and his classic Adidas shirt, I am Spencer Miller. This has been another edition of the Isolation Series, and we'll see you all again, as Paul said, next week, starting on Monday. Bye-bye. Hey guys, thanks once again for tuning in to today's episode of the Isolation Series with me, Spencer Miller, and that guy right over there, Paul Shields. As always, today's show has been brought to you by wellbeingsperformance.com for all your virtual meeting and virtual needs, period. Please go to wellbeingsperformance.com, as well as Barbarian Steakhouse, Toronto and the Greater Toronto Area's premier steakhouse facility since 1959. For more information, including any new updates on their menu, please go to barbarians.com, as well as imprintpilates.com, Toronto's premier Pilates studio, and greenstorage.ca, Toronto and the Greater Toronto Area's #1 self-storage facility. For more information, please go to greenstorage.ca. And Paul, please tell people all about some more whole grain goodness that is us.
Folks, be sure to check us out on podbean.com by going to theisolationseries.podbean.com. There you'll find the audio-only versions of the podcast, including all of our past amazing interviews. One more time, that's theisolationseries.podbean.com. And hey, don't forget to follow us on Instagram. It's at @VSpencerMiller and at Pauly Shields, Pauly spelled Pawly. So find us on podbean.com, follow us on Instagram, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
And once again, everybody, thank you for watching and or listening and supporting this thing we like to call the Isolation Series. For Paul Shields, I am Spencer Miller, and we will see you again very, very soon.